I never thought a normal Tuesday could spiral into one of the most terrifying days of my life. My child's surgery was scheduled for noon, and I was juggling paperwork, phone calls, and the endless worry that gnaws at any parent's heart. Everything had been meticulously planned: the pre-op instructions, the hospital bag, even the snacks for the waiting room. And yet, there was this tiny voice in the back of my mind whispering, something going to go wrong. I should have known it wasn't the hospital, not the surgery itself, that would test me. No, the threat came from the most unlikely source: my HOA president, Karen. Everyone in the neighborhood knew her. The self-appointed queen of compliance, the woman who once held a 3-hour meeting about the proper height of our mailbox numbers. I had laughed it off when she scolded me for planting lavender instead of tulips. But that laughter seemed ridiculous now. It started with a knock on the door. At first, I thought it was the hospital courier bringing last-minute paperwork. But when I opened the door, there she was. Karen, sunglasses perched precariously on her nose, clipboard in hand, giving me that smug, I-own-everything look that made my stomach twist. "Morning," she said, as if we were meeting for coffee instead of something far more sinister. "I just wanted to check on the upcoming surgery, for safety." I blinked. "Safety?" I asked cautiously. "My child's doctor has already cleared everything. The hospital has protocols." "Protocols?" she scoffed, flipping a sheet on her clipboard like she was reading a law I had never heard of. Sometimes people ignore neighborhood regulations, and I simply can't allow that. I wanted to laugh, the absurdity of it all, but there was something in her tone that made my throat tighten. She wasn't here to gossip about paint colors or garden fences. She was here with a purpose, and that purpose didn't sound friendly. I tried to reason with her, calmly explaining that the HOA had no jurisdiction in a hospital, that my child's life and health were not subject to community bylaws. Karen tilted her head, eyes narrowing, lips pursed. She tapped her clipboard. "Well," she said, "sometimes the rules exist for a reason. You wouldn't want to risk something happening that could have been prevented." At that moment, I realized the full weight of her statement. She wasn't joking. My hands tightened on the doorframe, a mixture of fear and disbelief coursing through me. This was Karen. Karen, who once sent a warning letter because my mailbox was slightly askew. And now, somehow, she was implying she had the right, or the obligation, to interfere with my child's surgery. I tried to shoo her away politely. "Karen, you need to leave. This is a hospital matter. I'm taking my child in for surgery. You can't." She interrupted, waving a finger in the air. "I can do whatever I must. This is for the greater good of the community." I stared at her, utterly speechless. For a brief, surreal second, I almost laughed at the absurdity of it all. She was serious. She actually believed that HOA regulations could override medical decisions. Then she drove away, and I thought, thank God, it's over. I didn't realize that was only the beginning. By the time we reached the hospital, I caught sight of her standing in the parking lot, clipboard in hand, like a hawk circling its prey. My heart pounded. My child clutched my hand, oblivious to the storm brewing outside, and I tried to keep my own panic hidden. I knew I had to focus, but every instinct screamed that Karen wasn't just here to watch. She was planning something. As we walked toward the hospital doors, the unease settled deep in my stomach. Something about the way she watched me, the way her lips curled into that knowing smirk, told me one thing: today would not be simple. Today, I was going to have to face a threat I never imagined existed, one that didn't come from illness, machines, or even chance. It came from Karen, and she was not someone to be underestimated. And in that moment, I realized that getting my child safely into surgery would be only the first battle. The real fight, I feared, was just beginning. The hospital lobby was supposed to be a sanctuary, a place where procedures were orderly, and the only worries were the usual pre-surgery jitters. But as soon as I walked through the automatic doors, I realized my sanctuary had been invaded. There she was, Karen, standing near the entrance like she owned the place. Clipboard in hand, sunglasses still perched on her nose, scanning the area as if she were inspecting a garden instead of a hospital. My stomach tightened. How did she get in here? And more importantly, why? I tried to keep calm, to focus on my child's small hand in mine. "It's going to be okay," I whispered, forcing a smile, though my own nerves were fraying. My child squeezed my hand back, oblivious to the tension radiating around us. Karen, of course, was anything but oblivious. She spotted me immediately, her eyes locking on mine with a mix of triumph and smugness. It was the same look she gave when someone accidentally trimmed a bush 1 inch too short. Only now, the stakes were higher, much higher. She started walking toward us, clipboard held like a shield. "I hope you understand the importance of following proper protocols," she said, loud enough for passing nurses and patients to hear. "Even surgeries can be affected by neighborhood compliance issues." I froze, my mouth opened and closed, trying to form words, but all that came out was a strangled, "Karen, this is a hospital." She ignored me entirely, stepping closer. "Hospitals aren't exempt. Rules exist for a reason. You wouldn't want your child to experience complications that could have been prevented." I could feel my face burning. People were staring. Some shook their heads, others whispered to each other. One nurse gave me a subtle, sympathetic glance, like she'd seen this type of behavior before, but probably not in a hospital. I took a step forward. "Karen, you need to leave. My child's life isn't up for debate. You don't have any authority here." Authority, that word seemed to bounce off her like water off a duck, back. She tapped her clipboard again. "I have all the authority I need. It's my responsibility to ensure safety. You wouldn't understand, but someone has to protect the community." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Her protect the community speech, while walking into a hospital, was terrifying and absurd in equal measure. Humor bubbled briefly, absurdly, in the corner of my mind. I could almost see her measuring IV stands, checking the color of the surgical drapes. But then I reminded myself, this wasn't funny. Not even a little. We were moving toward the surgical wing, and my panic was building. Karen's slow, deliberate stride was like a predator closing in, clipboard clutched like a weapon. Every instinct screamed, "Stop her before she does something insane." I lunged gently to block her path. "Karen, step back now." She tilted her head, smiling faintly, as if I were the unreasonable one. "Step back. No, this is for everyone's good. You'll see soon enough why intervention is necessary." "Intervention," I shouted, my voice echoing down the sterile hallway. People were stopping to stare, and I could feel my heart thudding. "This isn't a neighborhood meeting. This is a hospital. You are not allowed near the surgery." Karen's smirk faltered for a brief second, replaced by a look of calculation. She glanced at the surgical equipment through the glass doors ahead, and my stomach sank. That glance, it was too focused, too deliberate. She wasn't just causing a scene anymore. She was planning. I backed toward the nurse's station, trying to intercept her. "You can't do this. You have no right." Before she could respond, a nurse stepped forward, her expression hard. "Sir, we're going to have to ask you to leave your guest area," she said, looking straight at Karen. Karen waved a hand dismissively. "I'm not leaving. I have responsibilities, rules, compliance." I felt panic rising in my chest. She wasn't listening, and time was slipping away. The surgery was scheduled to start any minute, and here she was, an unpredictable force capable of God only knew what. And then I saw it. A small movement by one of the surgical machines, something Karen had touched. My heart stopped. That was it. That's when I realized she wasn't just being dramatic, she was tampering with equipment. Everything fell into sharp focus. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't a prank. My child's life was now directly at risk, not from illness or surgery complications, but because Karen had decided she was in charge of safety. I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of what was about to happen. The nurse whispered to me, "Sir, she's messing with the equipment. We need security." I nodded, barely able to speak. "Do whatever you need to, please." And in that heartbeat, the quiet tension of the hospital corridor erupted into a storm I wasn't sure we could survive. The moment the nurse whispered that Karen was tampering with the equipment, a cold, sinking feeling spread through me. My hands tightened around my child's small ones, trying to offer calm that I didn't feel. Every instinct screamed at me, this is serious. This is not just a neighbor being obnoxious. This is dangerous. I watched in disbelief as Karen leaned over the IV machine, tapping at buttons like she was programming a microwave. Her expression was that same smug, self-satisfied look she always wore when enforcing some ridiculous neighborhood rule. Only now, instead of a crooked mailbox or a yellowing lawn, she was fiddling with a life-saving device. I tried to move toward her to pull her back, but every step felt like wading through quicksand. The hall felt impossibly long, every second stretching out like an eternity. Karen, stop, step away from that equipment. My voice cracked, echoing off the sterile walls. She looked at me, tilting her head as if she were humoring a child throwing a tantrum. I'm simply ensuring that everything is up to code, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. You don't understand the importance of rules. I do. I could feel the panic rising, clawing at my chest. I wanted to scream, to shake her, but I knew that wouldn't work. The only way this could end safely was with someone who had authority, someone who could make her leave. The nurse, sensing my desperation, grabbed her radio. Security, we have a breach at the surgical wing. Unauthorized individual tampering with equipment. Immediate assistance required. Karen, oblivious to the radio call, continued inspecting the machine. She even pulled out her tape measure, yes, a tape measure, and held it against the IV pole as if measuring for height compliance. The absurdity of it should have made me laugh, but there was no humor left in me. Not when a button she could press might alter my child's life forever. I moved closer, keeping one hand on my child. Karen, you are endangering my child's life. Step back right now. She waved me off dismissively. I am protecting the community. Your child will thank me someday. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. The world felt impossibly heavy, the air thick with tension. Every second she remained, there was a second closer to disaster. Then finally, security arrived. 2 uniformed guards, tall and imposing, stepped into the hall. Ma'am, you need to come with us immediately, one said, his tone firm but calm. Karen turned to face them, her smug expression faltering for the first time. I don't need permission from security. I have the right. The second guard stepped closer, blocking her path. We're asking, not negotiating. For a moment, I thought she might argue, fight, even refuse to leave. Her lips curled into that infuriating half-smile, the one that said she believed she was clever enough to outwit everyone. But then she saw the seriousness in the guards' faces and the panic in mine, and the smirk vanished. Reluctantly, she stepped back, still muttering about rules and compliance, but at least the immediate danger was contained. I sank to the floor against the wall, my body shaking. My child looked up at me, eyes wide, and I forced a reassuring smile. It's okay. She's gone now, you're safe. The nurse hurried over, checking the machine that Karen had touched. Everything's intact, she said, though her voice carried the weight of near disaster. But that could have been bad, very bad. I nodded, swallowing hard. Every muscle in my body ached with adrenaline and fear. The absurdity of Karen's obsession with rules mixed horribly with the reality of what she had just done. This wasn't a neighborhood quarrel. This was life or death. As the surgical team wheeled my child away, I stayed behind for a moment, watching Karen being escorted toward the exit. Even in her removal, she kept her head high, still muttering about community safety. I wanted to scream, to tell her she had no right, that she had crossed a line that no HOA bylaw could ever justify. But there was no time. The focus had to be on my child now, on ensuring that the surgery went smoothly, that the nightmare she had created didn't continue to escalate. Still, I couldn't shake the image of her smirk, the way she had leaned over that machine with complete conviction that she was doing the right thing. And I knew, deep down, this wasn't over. Karen didn't just cause a scene. She had made it personal, and her obsession with rules meant she wouldn't let it go easily. As I followed the medical team down the hall, heart pounding, I realized the terrifying truth. I was about to enter a battle I never signed up for. Not with the hospital, not with the doctors, but with a neighbor who believed she had the right to interfere with my child's life. And I had no choice but to be ready for whatever she would do next. I thought the worst was over once Karen had been physically removed from the surgical area. I was wrong. Oh, so very wrong. As soon as the guards escorted her toward the hospital exit, she stopped, spun on her heels, and fixed me with that same smug stare that had haunted me all morning. "You think this is over?" she called, her voice carrying down the sterile hall. "You haven't heard the last of me. I have every right to intervene. You'll see. Rules are rules." My stomach dropped. Rules? My child's life hung in the balance, and Karen was thinking in terms of bylaws. I clenched my fists, trying to swallow back a rush of panic, frustration, and disbelief. I felt like screaming, but I knew it wouldn't accomplish anything. Karen thrived on confrontation. That's when the doctor appeared. Calm, precise, and utterly unamused. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. He assessed Karen's actions with a single glance and shook his head in disbelief. "Ma'am," he said firmly, pointing toward the exit where Karen had paused, "you have just endangered a child's life. This is not a community meeting. This is not an HOA inspection. You are putting a patient at risk, and you will leave immediately." Karen's expression wavered just slightly, but she quickly recovered. "I am protecting the community," she insisted, gesturing wildly with her clipboard. "You don't understand. Some people ignore rules. I have to ensure compliance. I have authority." The doctor's eyes narrowed. He wasn't angry in the way most people get angry. This was deeper. The kind of anger that sees danger clearly and refuses to tolerate it. "You have no authority here. None. You are trespassing and interfering with a medical procedure. If you do not leave now, the authorities will be called." That was the line. Karen's smirk faltered entirely for the first time that morning. I could almost see the wheels turning in her mind, weighing her obsession with rules against the reality of police involvement. Before she could say anything, a nurse whispered something to the doctor, and his gaze flicked toward me. "Sir, stay close. She may attempt to escalate further." My heart thudded. I didn't want to be involved in a confrontation, but I knew the doctor was right. Karen was unpredictable, and her obsession with control could escalate in ways I couldn't predict. I followed him cautiously, one hand still holding my child's small hand, the other trembling slightly. Karen, however, refused to budge. She tapped her clipboard against her hip like it was a weapon. "I am not leaving. You cannot silence me. I am protecting the neighborhood." I could feel my frustration boiling over. "Karen, you are endangering my child. This is not about your HOA. This is a hospital. You are not allowed here." My voice was loud, echoing off the walls, full of fear, anger, and desperation. She tilted her head again, the infuriating, condescending tilt that suggested she thought she was smarter than everyone. "You think this is about your child? No, this is about principles, about rules. You may not see the importance now, but someday you'll understand." I wanted to scream, to shake some sense into her, but I couldn't. She wasn't reasoning. She was obsessed. Her version of rules had warped into something dangerous and irrational. The doctor stepped closer, his presence calm but firm. "Ma'am, security will remove you if necessary. You will leave or the police will be involved. This is your final warning." Karen opened her mouth, ready to argue, but the stern look on his face froze her mid-sentence. For a moment, I thought she might finally step back, but then she muttered something about legal rights and community compliance under her breath. Her determination was frightening. No logic, no sense of reality, just obsession. I realized then how serious this had become. Karen wasn't just a nuisance. She was a threat. And even with security and the doctor involved, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wouldn't end quietly. I squeezed my child's hand tightly, taking a deep breath to steady myself. "It's okay," I whispered. "They've got this, you're safe." But my voice wavered. Even as I said it, I knew the danger hadn't passed. Not really. Karen's last words as she was finally escorted out still echoed in the hall. "You'll see, you haven't seen the last of me. Rules are rules." I let out a shaky breath, my heart still racing. The immediate threat was gone, but the battle wasn't over. Karen had made it personal, and I knew deep down that this was just the beginning of a conflict that would push every limit of my patience, my courage, and my nerves. The surgical team guided us forward, and I tried to focus on the task at hand, getting my child safely through surgery. But in the back of my mind, I couldn't stop imagining Karen plotting her next move. And I realized, with a chill, that this was only the first act of a nightmare I never signed up for. Even though Karen had been removed from the surgical wing, the tension didn't lift, it lingered like a heavy fog. Every beep of a monitor, every shuffle of hospital staff down the corridor made me flinch. My mind replayed her smirk, her obsessive tapping of the clipboard, her wild insistence that rules are rules. I had to focus on my child, but my nerves were frayed to the breaking point. The waiting room felt smaller than ever. I sat in the stiff plastic chair, gripping my child's hand, trying to breathe, trying to calm the whirlwind of emotions inside me. Fear, disbelief, anger, and exhaustion collided, making it nearly impossible to think straight. I kept checking my phone, half expecting another message or call from Karen. She was relentless. Sure enough, my phone buzzed. It was her. "You think this is over? It's not. I have legal rights to intervene in all community-related matters, including health decisions. You will see consequences." I stared at the text, stunned. Legal rights? Consequences? My child's surgery had barely started, and Karen was already spinning some new narrative in her head. A mix of anger and disbelief surged through me. How could someone so obsessed with control and bylaws turn a hospital into a battlefield? The hospital staff tried to keep me calm. A nurse brought water, another offered quiet reassurance. "She's not allowed back," one said gently, glancing at the phone in my hand. "We've documented everything. Security knows to call the police if she returns." I nodded, but my mind refused to quiet. Karen wasn't just annoying or intrusive, she was unpredictable. And that unpredictability was terrifying. I kept thinking about what might have happened if she hadn't been intercepted. The image of her leaning over the IV machine, twisting knobs she had no right to touch, refused to leave my mind. Hours crawled by. Every footstep in the hallway made me flinch. Every glance at the waiting room doors made me tense. And through it all, my phone buzzed intermittently with more messages from Karen, each one more absurd than the last. "Rules apply to everyone. Compliance is mandatory. You will regret ignoring your obligations." I couldn't help a bitter laugh at the ridiculousness of it all. She was treating the hospital like it was a neighborhood association meeting. If it weren't so terrifying, I might have laughed harder. But fear for my child drowned out any humor. I tried to talk to my spouse, to share the burden of worry, but even that was complicated. The panic in my chest made my words shaky. She's not going to stop, is she?" I asked, almost to myself. My spouse shook their head. "Not until we're out of danger. She's obsessive. She thinks she's right." Obsessive, that was the word. Karen didn't see limits. She didn't see consequences. And she certainly didn't see boundaries. Everything was about her perception of rules and control. Then the nurse returned with a small update. "The surgery is scheduled to start soon. The team is ready and security is keeping an eye out. You need to stay calm, sir. Focus on your child." I nodded, taking a shaky breath, trying to summon composure I didn't feel. But deep down, I knew the tension wasn't over. Karen might have been physically removed, but she was already plotting, already scheming. Every second of my child's surgery would feel like a countdown to her next interference. The emotional strain was relentless. My heart was pounding, my palms were clammy, and every nerve in my body was on high alert. It felt like waiting in the eye of a storm that refused to pass, knowing the storm's architect was somewhere, scheming her next move. And as I sat there, trying to steady my breathing, the thought hit me like a punch to the chest. Karen wasn't just a nuisance. She was a ticking time bomb, a person so obsessed with control that she could risk a child's life to prove her point. I squeezed my child's hand, whispering, "It's okay, you're going to be fine." But even as I said it, my mind raced. This wasn't just a neighborhood squabble anymore. This was survival. And in that tense, quiet waiting room, I realized the fight wasn't over. Karen had set the stage for a confrontation far bigger than a clipboard or a minor disruption. The real battle was just beginning, and I had no idea how far she would go to make her rules matter. The day of the surgery felt impossibly long. Every hour crawled, every minute stretched, as if time itself was conspiring to make the tension unbearable. My child sat quietly beside me, a mix of fear and trust in their eyes that cut me to the core. I wanted to be calm, to reassure them, but the storm of anxiety in my chest was relentless. Even though Karen had been removed earlier, her presence still loomed over the hospital like a dark cloud. I could picture her, clipboard in hand, plotting her next move, convinced that she had some kind of authority she did not possess. And now, as the surgical team prepared, I realized just how much danger that obsession could have caused. I walked toward the surgical wing with my child, flanked by a nurse and a doctor who gave me a firm, steadying nod. "We're ready," the doctor said. "Security is stationed nearby. Everything will be fine. Focus on your child." I nodded, swallowing hard, trying to calm my racing heart. But just as we approached the room, a commotion in the hall made me freeze. My stomach dropped. There she was, Karen. Somehow she had returned, moving toward the surgical area with the same determined smirk, the same ridiculous posture that made her look like a neighborhood inspector gone rogue. My chest tightened. How did she get past security? Why hadn't anyone stopped her sooner? One of the guards stepped in front of her immediately. "Ma'am, you are not allowed beyond this point. Step back now." Karen raised a hand as if dismissing him. "I have every right." "Ma'am," the guard barked, his patience gone. "Step back or you will be removed." Her smirk faltered for a second, then returned, more defiant than ever. "You don't understand. Rules are rules." The absurdity was almost laughable. I wanted to shake my head, to scold her for treating a hospital like a HOA meeting. But the stakes were far too high. This wasn't about garden fences or mailbox heights. This was my child's life. The doctor stepped forward, his calm authority cutting through the tension like a knife. "Karen, if you do not leave now, the police will be called. You are endangering a patient. This is your final warning." Her eyes narrowed, but the determination in his tone seemed to reach her. Finally, for the first time that day, her smirk wavered. She muttered something under her breath about community oversight and legal rights, and then took a step back, glaring at me as if we were enemies on opposite sides of a battlefield. Security had already called the police. A few tense minutes later, 2 officers arrived, brisk and authoritative. Karen straightened her posture, trying to look defiant, but the reality of the situation weighed down her bravado. The officers gently but firmly guided her away from the area. She protested, citing HOA bylaws and imagined community safety regulations, but no one listened. I felt my legs go weak. Relief surged through me like a wave, leaving me shaking in its wake. My child looked up at me, sensing my tension, and I forced a smile. "See, nothing to worry about, we're safe now." The nurses and doctors moved quickly, preparing my child for surgery. I followed, still trembling but trying to focus on what mattered, my child's safety. Every beep, every shuffle, every whispered instruction reminded me how close we had come to disaster. Karen's obsession could have caused real harm, and the thought was terrifying. As the surgical doors closed behind us, I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. The immediate threat was gone, at least for now. Karen had been stopped, police were involved, and the surgical team was professional and vigilant. But the fear lingered. Even knowing she was being taken away, I couldn't shake the image of her meddling with equipment in that hallway. I whispered a prayer under my breath, gripping my child's hand tightly. "You're going to be okay, I promise. Everything going to be fine." And for the first time that day, I allowed myself a flicker of hope. Karen was gone, the police had her, the surgery could finally proceed safely. But deep in my chest, I knew one truth that wouldn't leave me. This wasn't just a one-time confrontation. Karen's obsession didn't end with her removal. She had already proven how far she was willing to go. And I realized, with a chill, that the fight for my family's safety wasn't over yet. We were only halfway through this nightmare, and the next battle, legal, emotional, and painfully absurd, was waiting just beyond the doors of the hospital. The sound of sirens was a strange comfort and a terrible omen all at once. Karen had been escorted from the surgical area, but her defiance hadn't faded. She still argued with security, still waved her clipboard as if it were a weapon, still insisted that she had rights to interfere with the hospital. When the police arrived, the entire scene escalated. Karen turned to face the officers, standing tall with a sense of entitlement that made my stomach churn. "You can't do this. I am protecting the community. You have no authority over me." The lead officer, calm but authoritative, stepped forward. "Ma'am, you have interfered with a medical procedure. You have endangered a child's life. You need to come with us immediately." Karen gasped, clutching her clipboard to her chest like it was a shield. Interfered, endangered, I was simply ensuring compliance. Rules exist for everyone. I felt my chest tighten. The absurdity of her argument was almost comedic, if it weren't so terrifying. This was the same woman who once fined me $50 for planting lavender instead of tulips, and now she was claiming the law was on her side for tampering with medical equipment. The officers exchanged a glance. One stepped closer. "Ma'am, step aside. You are under arrest for interference with a medical procedure and trespassing. Resistance will only make things worse." Her expression shifted, first disbelief, then indignation, then panic. She muttered about HOA authority and legal loopholes under her breath, but the officers were unyielding. They guided her toward the squad car, her protests echoing through the hall. I could barely focus. My heart was still hammering from the adrenaline. As the doors closed behind her, I sank into a chair, my legs trembling. My child leaned into me, sensing the tension. "Mom, Dad, is she gone?" "Yes," I whispered, trying to steady my voice. "She's gone now, you're safe." The doctor approached, his expression serious but calm. "I need to explain what could have happened if she hadn't been stopped. The equipment she tampered with is highly sensitive. Even minor interference could have caused catastrophic failure during surgery. You need to understand how close you came to a disaster." I swallowed hard, every nerve in my body straining as the weight of that realization hit me. My mind raced with what-ifs. What if the guards hadn't arrived in time? What if the nurse hadn't noticed? What if my child? The doctor placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "But the important thing is that you are here now. Your child is about to be safe. Karen has been removed, and law enforcement is handling the rest. You did everything right by staying vigilant." I nodded, still shaking, still trying to process the surreal chain of events. Karen, who once obsessed over mailbox heights and garden fences, had escalated to a level I never imagined possible. And yet, here she was, being taken away by authorities while she continued to insist that she was in the right. The absurdity of it made me shake my head. She had brought HOA drama into a hospital operating room. She had nearly caused a medical disaster. And she had done it all with the same self-righteous smirk she wore when citing petty neighborhood rules. Even as relief washed over me, I knew the story wasn't over. Karen would face legal consequences, and the HOA would likely scrutinize her behavior. But what mattered most in that moment was my child, safe, alive, and about to undergo surgery without interference. I whispered quietly, holding my child's hand. "It's okay, you're going to be all right." The nurse smiled at me, a mix of sympathy and quiet triumph. "You did the right thing by staying calm and alert. We've seen cases like this before, but you handled it perfectly." And yet, as I watched the officers escort Karen away, still protesting loudly about rules and compliance, I couldn't help but feel a lingering tension. This woman had crossed a line. She had taken obsession and authority to a dangerous extreme, and even though she was being arrested, the absurdity and audacity of her actions would haunt me for a long time. But for now, there was a sliver of peace. The immediate danger had passed. The battle for my child's safety, at least in this moment, was won. And deep down, I knew this day would be remembered not just as a medical emergency, but as the day an HOA president tried to turn a hospital into her own private courtroom. The surgery felt like a lifetime compressed into a few tense hours. Each second stretched endlessly, every beep of the monitor echoing in my mind like a countdown. But finally, the doctor emerged from the operating room, a calm but serious expression on his face. "It went perfectly," he said. "Your child is stable and recovering. There were no complications. You can see them in a few minutes." Relief crashed over me in a wave so strong that I nearly collapsed. I held my child's hand tightly, whispering softly, "See, I told you everything would be okay." Their small fingers squeezed mine back, a quiet reassurance that life, for now, had returned to its fragile balance. The nurse guided us into the recovery room, where the familiar hum of machines was now comforting rather than terrifying. My child was resting, eyes fluttering open from time to time, and I stayed close, brushing a lock of hair from their forehead, feeling the tension finally ease. Even so, my thoughts kept drifting back to Karen. The absurdity of it all still lingered, but so did the gravity of what could have happened. She had been obsessed with rules to the point of endangering a child's life, tampering with sensitive medical equipment, and creating chaos in a hospital. And yet, somehow, she had convinced herself that her actions were justified. Later that day, I learned that Karen had been formally arrested for interference with a medical procedure, trespassing, and attempted tampering with hospital equipment. Her HOA influence crumbled under scrutiny, and legal authorities began a thorough investigation into her dangerous behavior. Even her neighbors, once afraid of her petty authoritarianism, were shocked at how far she had taken her obsession with rules. As I sat beside my child, holding their hand and watching the steady rise and fall of their chest, I reflected on everything that had happened. The fear, the absurdity, the sheer unpredictability of one person's obsession, it was almost surreal. And yet, through all the chaos, one thing had become painfully clear: vigilance matters. Courage matters. And sometimes, protecting those you love means facing unimaginable challenges head-on. I thought about the countless parents in hospitals, the moments of helplessness, and the tiny acts of bravery that make the difference between disaster and safety. Today, it had been about more than rules or compliance. It had been about human life, trust, and standing firm in the face of absurdity. Even as relief settled in, I knew the memory of Karen's smirk, the way she had leaned over that equipment with complete confidence in her righteousness, would linger for a long time. It was a reminder of how quickly ordinary life could be disrupted by someone who refused to see boundaries or the consequences of their actions. My child stirred, and I leaned close. "You're going to be okay," I whispered, repeating the mantra that had carried me through the entire ordeal. "Everything is going to be okay." And for the first time that day, I truly believed it. The immediate danger was gone. Karen was facing justice. The surgery was complete, and my child was safe. As we left the hospital later that afternoon, I glanced back at the building one last time, grateful for the staff, the security, and the authorities who had kept Karen in check. The absurdity of the situation would make for a strange story someday, but the relief, the gratitude, and the lessons learned were all too real. I realized that life often throws challenges in the most unexpected forms, sometimes a neighbor obsessed with rules, sometimes circumstances beyond control, but the courage to face them, to protect those who matter most, is what defines us. By the time we drove home, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with soft oranges and pinks. My child rested against my shoulder, peaceful at last, and I allowed myself to breathe fully for the first time in hours. Karen's reign of absurdity was over, at least for now. And while I knew the world would always have people like her, obsessed, unreasonable, and dangerous. I also knew that together, with vigilance and courage, we could face whatever came next. Today, we had survived. Today, life, love, and sanity had won. And as I held my child close, I made a quiet promise to always protect them, no matter how bizarre or terrifying the obstacles might be. Because some battles aren't just about rules, they're about life itself. Every HOA has a story on HOA Headaches. You'll hear the ones they tried to bury. Subscribe today.